What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's some of my final thoughts ahead of the Game Week 22 deadline. So I'm going to go through a little bit of press conference information, talk through captaincy, bench and headaches, and then answer some of your questions as well. So if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. So let's start with Liverpool. Arne Slot said that Domagoj Jota is a doubt to face Brentford with a niggle, so it doesn't sound like he's going to be out for a long time, but he has got enough of a problem where he is a doubt for Game Week 22. It seems pretty unlikely that he's going to start that game. If I was a Jota owner, I'd be very tempted to sell him. It's annoying because the fixtures afterwards are Ipswich at home, double game week, then Wolves at home, which are great. But since he's returned from injury, he's not had a single start in the Premier League. And maybe that was coming because he's been building up his fitness, but he's clearly not still fully fit. And he's not the best player when it comes to injury record either. So I feel like maybe you just get rid of him, even though it's annoying, and just bring someone in like Gordon, Fernandes, or maybe even move to like a Luis Diaz at Liverpool if you want to keep that attacking spot there. On Diaz, though, he did miss training yesterday with the sore throat, but is expected to train today. So I suspect he will be in that starting 11. It will be him, Gakpo, and Salah as normal. Nunez isn't suspended anymore. He had his 5th yellow card suspension against Forest, so he will be available. But I think with Jota a doubt, that front three is pretty set at the moment, and Nunez hasn't been playing that well when he's been available. Now, I don't think that means that Nunez never gets a start, but if we're looking at the best two attackers to go alongside Salah right now, it's probably Diaz and Gakpo, but I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So there was a bit of a bombshell in the Chelsea press conference today. Enzo Maresca basically said that Palmer, Colwill, Enzo, Fernandes and Lavia were all not in training. He said 3 or 4 players who were a doubt because of the last game against Bournemouth. On Palmer, he said it was the ankle in the first half. So for anyone that watched that game, Palmer did go down with a bit of an issue, but then he just played the rest of the match. So maybe it's developed into something a little bit more serious. I think with Lavia, he's never fully fit anyway, not really a massive FPL consideration. For Colwill, no one's buying him anyway. This wouldn't make me want to sell him because I think Chelsea have got some other good home games coming up. But maybe if you were stuck between Colwill and another player to bench, there's your decision made. On Enzo Fernandes, I still think at his price he's a pretty good option and probably not worth using a transfer on. I would not be surprised if Palmer, Enzo and Colwill are all in the starting 11. But obviously because there's a doubt, it might mean that you want to bench Enzo instead of one of your other attackers. With Palmer, you're definitely not selling him. I would absolutely start him unless we get more information. The one thing that will probably put me off doing is captaining him. So I'm going to do my predictions for Game Week 22 in the Sleeper app, which is completely free to download using the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen. If you haven't already joined the Let's Talk FPL League, make sure you do. There's another £50 Amazon voucher up for grabs in Game Week 22. You just have to predict whether it's going to be a home win, an away win, or a draw for each match. Whoever gets the most predictions will win that voucher. If there's more than one person with the same number of correct predictions, I'll do a draw on the Game Week 23 deadline stream. So as good as I think Bournemouth are, I think Newcastle at home are so strong. I've got to go for them to win. Brentford will cause Liverpool problems, but ultimately I think Liverpool will be too strong. Leicester versus Fulham is interesting. I should probably go for Fulham because they've been decent this year. But again, I think Leicester will get a goal against Fulham. That's part of the reason that I've benched Anderson. West Ham Palace, I'm going to go for Graham Potter to get another win. Arsenal Villa, I've got to go for Arsenal. Everton Spurs. Spurs struggling a little bit right now, but they've still got goals in their locker. Defensively, not so great, but Everton cannot score. That's their problem. I'm going to go for Spurs. Man United, I've got to back against Brighton, although that probably will be a draw. Forest definitely to beat Southampton. City to beat Ipswich. And Chelsea to beat Wolves, despite those doubts that Maresca has spoken about. That's how quick and easy it is to do. Get the app downloaded completely free. Link in the description below or scan the QR code on screen and submit your predictions before the games start this weekend. So for Crystal Palace, Glasner said that Ismail Sarr has a slight problem with his hamstring, so he's a doubt for Game Week 22. It didn't sound like he was going to be out for a long time or anything like that and could even feature in Game Week 22. Who knows? He might even start. So I don't think you need to panic about this if you've got him in your squad. And the fixtures after 22 are still pretty good. So Brentford at home in 23, Man United away in 24, Everton at home in 25. If I had him, and you've got the luxury or you've got spare transfers, you could just move him to a different cheap midfielder like Ahmad, Murphy, whoever it might be. If you've got a pretty deep squad where you've got a decent 8th attacker or a nice defender on the bench, and you were already not sure about benching them, this could be your excuse to just play them instead. If you're sat there and you've already dealt with other issues, you would have to take a -4 to get rid of Sarr. I would just risk him because there is still a chance that he will play. And if he does, it's a decent enough game against West Ham away. But obviously for anyone that's got the luxury of just dealing with it or playing someone else, I would consider doing that. So let's take a look at captaincy for game week 22. I think with that news from Maresca about Palmer, it pretty much makes Salah the standout option against Brentford away. And I know for my team now, I'm just going to be captaining Salah for the next 4 game weeks. This week against Brentford away, then Ipswich at home, double game week, then Wolves at home. It's pretty simple, it's very boring, but sometimes you've just got to go for the boring picks. And I think that is Salah this week. Like, Brentford have conceded 1.6 expected goals per 90 minutes over this entire season. Yes, it's an away game, but City had chances in that match as well. And from what we've seen so far this season, Liverpool are playing at a higher standard than Man City. So they will cause Brentford problems. Salah's been incredible. There's probably no real good reason now to look against him. Cole Palmer may have provided that because the Wolves' defence hasn't been great either, and it's a home game. But I just don't see the point in risking it. It probably will be the case that Palmer starts and plays 90 minutes, but because there's a doubt there, it's enough for me to just go for Salah instead. Isak I quite like, because he's on an incredible run. He's on course to break Jamie Vardy's record for goals in consecutive matches as well. But Bournemouth at home is a tougher fixture than Brentford away for me. They've conceded 1.27 expected goals conceded. I think where possible, if you've got a choice between a good forward and a really good midfielder, you take the midfielder for the potential for clean sheet points, extra points for a goal, and all that good stuff we've spoken about a lot of times in the past. So Salah over Isak for me does not mean that Isak's a bad option. If you want to go for him, you absolutely should. If you've still got Haaland, I would consider him as a massive differential this week. Ipswich only second to Southampton in terms of expected goals conceded. City will get chances in that game. Maybe Haaland will be celebrating his massive contract that he's just got up until like 2034, whatever crazy time it was. I quite like him. Do I think he's better than Salah? Not necessarily, but I think it's close enough that if you're looking to chase and you've still got Haaland, I would be considering sticking the armband on him. And then I included Chris Wood because people keep mentioning it. There's no way I would captain Chris Wood this week. I just look at those numbers, 0.31 expected goals per 90 compared to the rest of the players on this list. Chris Wood isn't even close to comparing, and that's not to knock him as a pick. He's great. I'm going to be worried about not owning him this week. He's probably going to give me a red arrow, but we're talking about captaincy. Chris Wood is not better than Salah or Isak or Haaland. Yes, he's got the fixture, but those underlying numbers just don't look great compared to the rest. And I know he's doubling his XG and he's become this clinical finisher and all that stuff, but there's just no way I would consider Chris Wood. I can't even think of too many positives apart from the fact it's Southampton. And look what happened with Haaland when he played Southampton at home. 1 goal. And look, Chris Wood will probably beat that. He'll probably go and score 2 goals. I just couldn't captain it. I don't really have anything else to say. The only way I would captain Chris Wood is if you haven't got Salah, Palmer, Isak or Haaland in your team. So I'm just going to go through some of the benching headaches that people sent to me. Basically, if you've got 2 players on this list, whoever is higher up the list, that is who I would put into the 11. But a lot of these calls are close, so that's why they're headaches in the first place. So if you've got a gut feeling either way, just take it, right? For me, I've got João Pedro at the top against Man United away. I think Brighton will cause that Man United defence problems. João Pedro's on penalties. We know he's fit. I'm expecting him to be in the starting 11 again. There is maybe some risk there, but I think given that he was back so quick after that last minor injury he had with his ankle in training, I think he'll start this game. He probably just won't play 90 minutes. But because of the penalties, I've had to put him at the top. Next, I've got Semenyo. Fixture-wise, Newcastle away is not as good as what Ahmad and Murphy have. But Semenyo's been putting up really good numbers all season. And it's not just because of what happened against Chelsea. I think he could potentially at some point soon go on a little bit of a run. I think the fact that he's almost certain to play 90 minutes really helps as well. So I've got him after João Pedro, then Ahmad, then Murphy. Then we come on to some of the defenders. So Aina at the top, Southampton at home. It's such a good fixture. Forest defence is proper decent. He has to be at the top. Then Gabriel because of that goal threat and how good Arsenal defence is. Then Vardiol, then Timber. The reason that I put Timber below Vardiol is because Vardiol's got a good fixture as well, but also his goal threat is decent as well. I'd say he's got more attacking threat than Timber. Again, quite a close call. You could flip them around, but I just wanted to explain my thought process. Then I've got Enzo and Sarr. It's hard to know exactly how much of a doubt Enzo is based on what Maresca said, but Sarr having a hamstring problem puts me off a little bit more. That is why Enzo is ahead of Sarr. If they were both going to start, one, they'd be further up the list, and also Sarr would definitely be ahead of Enzo. You could argue with Sarr in particular, because it is a hamstring that Maresca's mentioned, that he should probably be much lower, because there is obviously going to be some doubt that you don't risk hamstring injuries. But because he didn't seem, I don't know, from what I've read at least, he didn't seem that worried. I've put him above a lot of defenders, but again, I'm not quite sure about that. Then I got Van Dijk, Brentford away. Brentford will cause Liverpool problems, but Liverpool defence is decent. Then Lewis Hall against Bournemouth at home. Some people would probably argue you should play Robinson ahead of Hall. I wouldn't really strongly argue against that. I think Leicester is the better fixture, but Newcastle are at home. That's the reason I've gone for Lewis Hall. Then Munoz, West Ham away. Then Castagna above Anderson. And then Rico Lewis at the bottom. Ipswich away is a good fixture. The reason Rico Lewis is miles below Vardio is just because he got benched last game, and I just don't think he's worth the headache. Like, he probably will start, but I don't know if I would want to risk it. On the Munoz being above Castagna and Anderson, but not Robinson, it's because Robinson's a little bit more attacking than the other Fulham defenders, and the fixture is better. I think Robinson's attacking output or his attacking potential is being overstated a little bit within the community, but it is better than Castagna and Anderson. But I've got Munoz ahead because of his own goal threat. Again, it's all really close, but I think I'm happy with that. I think if I had Robinson and Munoz, I'd probably play Robinson, but if I've got Munoz and Castagna or Anderson, which I do, I'm playing Munoz ahead of them. So which third Liverpool player should we be bringing in to target the upcoming fixtures? So just a reminder, Brentford away in 22, Ipswich at home in 23, double game week in 24, which is Bournemouth away and Everton away, and then Wolves at home in game week 25. I think for most people, Salah is the number one Liverpool player. No arguments from anyone there. For a lot of us, we've already got Trent Alexander-Arnold, so I'm not going to talk about him too much. If you don't own Trent, then absolutely you could go for Van Dijk for safety of minutes, and then you've got Salah, Van Dijk, then you're looking for a third. But for the purposes of this question, I'm going to ignore Salah and Trent for now. Because of the decent fixtures, especially those home games in 23 and 25, I would be very tempted to punt on a second attacker alongside Salah. It has to be Gakpo or Diaz. Jota's obviously got that knock that Slot talked about. He hasn't started a game for a while in the Premier League. There's just too many doubts there for me. And Nunez hasn't been in favour for a long time. It doesn't mean that Nunez won't get minutes, but there's no way we can consider him from an FPL point of view. Gakpo has got more starts and minutes than Diaz recently. I also think when you consider the structure of people's squads right now, midfields, right, they're stacked. I've got Mbeumo, lots of you have got Gordon, lots of you just bought Fernandes in, Salah, Palmer, all those cheap options like Murphy, Ahmad, Elanga, etc. There maybe isn't the room for Diaz, whereas up front, if you ask people who are the best three forwards to own right now, you'll get Isak definitely, probably Chris Wood quite a lot. Then the third player, there's a lot of debate around who the best option is. So Gakpo might fit into people's squads a little bit better than Diaz, and so I'd probably slightly favour him. The only thing I would say about both of them is go and check what your squad's going to look like over the next couple of weeks. So I was looking at this after I recorded the team selection video earlier. When I get to game week 23, where Liverpool have Ipswich at home, this is what my attack is, right? Palmer against City away. I'm not going to sell him unless he's injured. Salah, Eze Brentford at home, Mbeumo Palace away, Isak Southampton away, Solanke Leicester at home, João Pedro Everton at home. Now, don't get me wrong, I'd rather have Gakpo if he's going to start than João Pedro, but obviously there's a big increase in price there. And basically, none of these attackers need to be sold. You go to game week 24, when you've got the double, the fixtures don't look quite as good, but they're also not terrible. So Palmer West Ham at home, Eze Man United away, Mbeumo Spurs at home, João Pedro Forest away, Solanke Brentford away, Isak Fulham at home. Whereas in my defence, I've got Raya and goal City at home, Gabriel also City at home, Munoz with Man United away, Anderson with Newcastle away. It doesn't look quite so nice. The point I'm trying to make is, in isolation, you'd rather have a Liverpool attacker as your third spot rather than a defender. But for your team, it might not be the best thing to do. It might be easier to fit a defender in rather than going for the attacker. So Gakpo's good, then Diaz if you're looking from an attacking point of view. Defensive, if you can afford it, it's Van Dijk. Absolutely secure of starts. Attacking threat is there as well. Konate is fine. And I think when he's fit, he's nailed to partner Van Dijk in that back four. But I would want to delay bringing him in till as late as possible. Maybe I'd risk it in 23, otherwise 24, because he got bought off after the 65th minute against Forest. Maybe it was tactical, but he's not long back from injury. So that would worry me a little bit because he is a bit injury prone. And then Alisson in goal, don't mind him. Similar thing to Konate, right? He is a goalkeeper that does seem to pick up more injuries than most others. But I think if you're looking at combinations and ignoring price for a second, I would rather have Pickford and Van Dijk than like an Alisson and an Everton defender. I know there's a big price difference between the two, simply because Pickford will get save points when he doesn't keep clean sheets. I don't think any of the Everton defenders are particularly attacking. You might get returns from Mikalenko, Ashley Young, etc., but I'd rather have Van Dijk. Pickford and Van Dijk just sounds a lot better. So I don't mind Alisson, but I'd veer more towards a defender if you can. So a couple of people asked me, who would I bring in out of Fernandes and Gordon if I was buying in game week 22? I think when we're looking at short-term fixtures, Gordon probably just about wins it. It's Bournemouth at home in 22, Southampton away in 23, which is a great fixture, and then Fulham at home in 24. You compare that to Bruno, he's got Brighton at home, Fulham away, and Palace at home. So not terrible, but definitely not as good as what Newcastle have over the next 3 weeks. When you expand that to the next 6 game weeks, it starts to look a little bit better for Bruno. After Palace at home in 24, it's Spurs away, who haven't been great defensively. Although, to be fair, by the time we get to 25, Van de Ven and Romero might be back, which will make it more difficult. Then it's Everton away, which is not terrible. Then Ipswich at home in 27. Compare that to Newcastle. After Fulham at home in 24, it's City away, Forest at home, Liverpool away. It doesn't look quite so good. And I know everyone thinks that City is this really easy fixture. You still don't probably want to play them away from home, especially when that's coupled with good defences like Forest and Liverpool. Also, when we go to game week 29, we know that this is going to be a blank game week for whoever gets through to the Carabao Cup final plus their opponents. And Newcastle have a 2-0 lead they've got a 2-0 lead over Arsenal that they're taking to St James's Park. You would expect Newcastle to be through to the final, in which case their match versus Palace would be off, and that week Man United play against Leicester. Now, it's not perfect because between that Ipswich game in 27 and Leicester in 29, Man United do play Arsenal. But overall, if you're looking 22 to 29, I would prefer to go for Bruno. Now, some people might say you're thinking too long term, just go for Gordon and use the transfer later. That's absolutely fine if you've got transfers and your team is well set. But if you're looking stuck and there's already a few other issues cropping up, I would take the longer term pick and go for Bruno. But short term, next 3, it probably is Gordon. So can you give your thoughts on when to wildcard? Is it too soon to use now? Should we be saving up transfers? So I did a whole video on chip strategy, blank and double game weeks before the game week 21 deadline, which will still be worth watching. I'm not going to go through all that in great detail. All I will say is this: if you're going to use your wildcard now, you better be prepared to start saving transfers because you are going to need them to manage what's to come later on. The blank in 29, the double in 33, another blank in 34, a double in 36, etc. For most people, just save your wildcard until after game week 29. I don't know the specific week that people will use it. I think the main weeks are probably going to be game week 30 or game week 35, but it's going to be so useful to manage the rest of the season. I find it hard to believe that people are in such dire straits with their team that they need to use it now. Just save it if you can. So I'm just going to quickly talk about my own team. I'm not going to go into it in massive detail because I already did a team selection video earlier this morning, but there are a few things that I've thought about since then. One is captaincy. I have removed the armband from Palmer. I'm sure it's going to be like Isak last week, right? Palmer will start. He'll probably get 80 plus minutes. But when you've got such a good option in Salah against Brentford away, there's just no point taking the risk. So Salah's got the captain's armband and Isak has got the vice captain. Outside of that, there's not too many players that I want to sell. But for the first time, probably all season, I'm getting closer to doing Solanke to Chris Wood. Now, I'm going to be honest, I probably will not make the move, but I'm going to explain why I'm thinking about it. Basically, I've got 4 transfers, right? And it's not, by the way, it's not just because Chris Wood is amazing and Solanke is rubbish. There's more to it than that. I've got 4 transfers, and outside of Solanke to Wood, I don't really have a huge amount of upgrades to make. Not in one transfer anyway. If I wanted Anthony Gordon, it takes 2, etc. I'm not going to do that. And look, rolling to 5 transfers next week is not a problem. But when I go to game week 23, my team looks really good in game week 23. Raya and Gabriel are not problems against Wolves away. I could switch one of them to a Liverpool defensive player, but I might not want to do that. I might want to leave the option open to get an attacker. So they're both okay. Trent's got Ipswich at home, not a problem. Munoz has got Brentford at home, not a problem. I already spoke about my attack earlier. Palmer, City away. Salah, Ipswich at home. Eze, Brentford at home. And Mbeumo, Palace away. Isak, Southampton away. Solanke, Leicester at home. João Pedro, Everton at home. There's no transfer to make here. So I could, like earlier on in the season, I thought there was no chance I would ever get to 5 transfers. Now I'm looking at my team thinking I could have 5 and then burn them. Now reality is if I had 5 next week, I would just find something to do. but nothing is really standing out to me. Sorry, I need to go back to Game Week 23 there. Nothing is standing out to me as to what transfer I would make. With 0.1 million in the bank, potentially I could do Anderson to Mikalenko if I really want a Everton defender, but that's about it. So there is some temptation to do Solanke to Chris Wood because his ownership's going to be high. He is better for Southampton at home than what Solanke is for Everton away. And then when I get to Game Week 23, I'm still going to have 4 free transfers. And I can either play Chris Wood against Bournemouth away, bench him if I really want to for Rodgers, who's got West Ham at home, or I could just use one of my 4 transfers to sell him, possibly to Gakpo. So I could go Solanke Wood to Solanke, right, and still have 4 transfers the week after in Game Week 24, or I could do Solanke Wood to Gakpo. The only reason I'm hesitating is because even though right now I'm looking at my team and there's nothing to do, there might be something to do next week. Injuries can happen, suspensions and stuff like that. I don't know if I want to back myself into a corner to have to go for Gakpo, because I feel like looking at my team, it's probably going to be better to go for a defender. But I am at least thinking about it. The seed has been planted. Sorry, I've clicked the wrong button there. The seed has been planted to maybe do Solanke to Wood. I think Solanke's great from next week, Leicester at home, but Chris Wood is clearly better in Game Week 22, sorry. If I had the money to do João Pedro to Chris Wood, I would, but I just don't want to downgrade anyone, not this week. Like Gabriel to Lewis Hall to do João. It doesn't even work. I've got to make 2 moves, actually. Sorry, I've got to make 3 moves, right? If I want to do João Pedro, I looked at this earlier. Let me just make this smaller so I can do it quicker. If I do João Pedro to Chris Wood, I need to free up 1.1 million. So, sorry, I can actually do Gabriel to Lewis Hall. So I could potentially do that. It does look better for this week. I'm just not convinced it's miles better for future weeks. But it is something I could do. I'd have 0.1 in the bank still, 2 transfers left, so I'd have 3 in Game Week 23. Yeah, Game Week 23 next week. Anyway, before I start rambling, I'm going to give that more consideration. I might use transfers this week, but it feels crazy to be using 2 transfers just to get Chris Wood in. I'm not going to captain him, as I've made very clear. Anyway, that's my thoughts. Give it a like if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button as well if you haven't already. Rate 5 stars on podcast. I'll be back tomorrow for a deadline stream starting at 9 AM UK time, so I'll catch some of you for that. Otherwise, good luck in Game Week 22, and we'll do it all again next week.